Captain William Kidd is considered to be the unluckiest pirate in history, and it appears the inspiration wasn't too far off, as Eustass Captain Kidd has quite the tragic life. After getting one-shotted alongside his partner Killer by Shanks and his crew obliterated as well as the ship, it appears as though his pirate career is over. It's possible for Kid or Killer to return to the story, but as for their pirate crew, that seems to be done, as the narrator states that the Kid pirates were completely eradicated, giving the same feeling as the Straw Hats when they were defeated by Kuma back in Sabaody, and they took 2 years to get back together. And Oda usually uses the destruction of a ship to signal the end of a pirate crew's career, such as Whitebeard and the Moby Dick, as well as Don Krieg from earlier in the series, and the destruction of the Victoria Punk actually holds a lot more meaning to it once you know the backstory of Kid and his crew. And unfortunately for Kid, this is yet another example to show just how cruel the New World is, as we've seen with countless other pirates throughout the stories. So today we're going to discuss the tragic life of Eustass Kid and his unlucky pirate career, the difference and parallels between him and Luffy, and his future role in the story, because I'm not completely sold that he's out of the story entirely. But if you don't want to end up like Kid and put on a t-shirt, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and click the bell icon to stay notified for more videos like this. I would greatly appreciate it. Kid as a character always felt like he was destined for greatness, as he was one of the very few of the worst generation that Oda always had a plan for since the very beginning, and alongside Luffy and Law are the 3 captains that will shape the future generations of pirates. But we joked about it earlier that maybe his plan was always to hype up Shanks and allow him to get the poneglyph rubbing so he can get much closer to Laugh-Tale, because unfortunately for Kid, Shanks is a lot more important to the overall plot of the story. But let's take it back to where it all began. It was revealed in SBS Volume 104, the backstory of Kid and how his crew was formed. Born and raised on an island unaffiliated with the world government, it was here where he met his best friend Killer, who both fell in love with a woman named Victoria. Over time, Kid, Killer, Heat, and Wire ended up becoming gang bosses over 4 towns residing on the island, but after an incident involving Victoria where she was killed by the ruling gang, Kid decided to cause an uprising and gather all of the gangs together, and then they overruled the gang, and thus the pirate crew was formed, and they named the ship Victoria Punk after their first love. He then begins to become infamous and make a name for himself, even gaining a bounty higher than Luffy's during the Sabaody archipelago, having a bounty of 315 million. But the way he got it was through brutality and causing harm to civilians and destroying towns. So by no means is Kid an actual good person, causing rampage throughout his pirate career. And he would kill anyone that got in his way or laughed at his dreams, and that is the key difference between him and Luffy, and really what separates them. It's the way they approach things. We've seen from Luffy that he learned from Shanks that some things just aren't worth it, whereas Kid came with a different approach and would slaughter anyone that would get in his way. And as evident with the time skip, Luffy decided to train as he needed to prepare, while as Kid went in head first and learned the hard way the cruelties of the New World, crucifying other pirates, showing just how evil and drastic of a pirate he is. But he learns quite the hard lesson that things aren't always as you want it to go, where he eventually runs into Shanks, or well, his crew, but never actually meets him, and suffers a heavy loss and gets his arm cut off, as well as some several scars. Later on down the line, he ends up going to Big Mom's territory, scarred one of the Sweet Commander's most likely snacks, as he seems to have a vendetta against the worst generation, as well as stealing one of the road poneglyphs and getting scot-free. But rumors made around that he didn't get far into Big Mom's territory and was completely embarrassed getting his arm cut off, which we know is false, but he was getting a bad reputation nonetheless. Eventually he made an alliance with Hawkins on Apu, until he was unfortunately betrayed by Apu and was completely obliterated by Kaido, with him and his crew forced to become slaves for the tyrant. And it's here where Kid becomes a center character and a rival to Luffy, planning to take down Kaido. But yet again, this is where the difference between the two comes, where Luffy has a strong will and will fight back, and even saved Kid at one point, kind of putting a blow to his pride. But also, Luffy decided to train until he fought Kaido and get better Haki and stronger, where Kid decided to get his crew and do what he usually does and go headstrong. Kid is a survivor. No matter what happens, he will always find a way to get back up, similar to Luffy. So Kid obviously had a bright future ahead of him, until Onigoshima came around, where things started to go south, where it felt as though, despite being very powerful and a rival to Luffy, he didn't really feel like that throughout the raid. Albeit he was strong and did, alongside Law, take out Big Mom, he wasn't really looking too good, and the fan base started to turn on him, and it felt as though characters within the series were making fun of him as well. Instead of seeing some great Haki feats from Kid, he relied heavily on his devil fruits, which is fine, but as evident with the fight with Luffy and Kaido, Haki is supreme and could rule over all. Where Luffy damaged Kaido with just his fist and Haki, Kid was in disbelief and ended up doing what he usually does and use brute force and try to crush Kaido. But alongside Law, he was able to put down Big Mom, or at least push her out of the country. Once again driving the parallel between Luffy and Kid, where both of these guys were involved with the defeat of an emperor, albeit Luffy did it by himself, where Kid and Law had to team up, showing that Luffy really is in a league of his own. And because of this, he ended up gaining a bounty of 3 billion alongside Law and Luffy, which is pretty massive, one of the highest bounty increases in the entire series. So he was on top of the world, he was a big shot, he was everything he wanted to be. We've seen that Luffy and Kid are very similar, have the same relationship with the right-hand man, as well as being both headstrong, prideful, having conqueror's Haki, and just going in guns blazing, but we've seen that the difference is the way they approach things, but also their luck. Luffy is lucky where Kid is not. He is the definition of how things could go wrong in the new world, whereas Luffy is the case of that making friends and allies on the way is gonna help in the long run, where Kid eventually is a loner, which led to his defeat against Shanks, when after defeating Big Mom, they eventually ran into Shanks by himself with no allies in front of Shanks and his entire fleet, and absolutely got obliterated. Obviously, Shanks did not take Kid lightly, as he saw into the future Kid was going to cause massive destruction, wiping out his fleet in just one move. And we all know Shanks always wants to protect his friends and the island, which is why he used all of his power to take out Kid. So again, Shanks took him seriously and as a threat, but once again, Kid did not learn his lesson and went headstrong against an emperor in his territory and tried to use brute force, attacking them unprovoked, with even his partner Killer warning him that not to let his guard down. You're in enemy territory. Last time they took your arm, this time they'll take your life, with Kid responding, only if I lose, and well, he ended up losing. Kid is yet another reminder that the new world is a cruel place. We've seen it countless times with other characters: Crocodile, Gecko Moria, Don Krieg, Squad with Roger, and of course Ace and Whitebeard. With all of these guys thinking they were hot shit and untouchable until they met a brick wall where their life changed forever. So the question is, what happens to Kid now? As far as I know, it seems as though the Kid pirates are over. Their pirate career is done, but Killer and Kid could always return to the story, with some people thinking they'll end up joining the Straw Hat Grand Fleet or end up getting a redemption arc, which I absolutely think that should not happen, because that is not in Kid's character. He is a conqueror, he is a survivor, he would never work under anyone, especially Luffy. Plus, this already happened previously with Kaido, and instead of getting redemption, he got even more angry. And plus, Luffy has a positive relationship with Shanks, which is funny because Shanks started the career of Luffy while Shanks ended the career of Kid. Now, I can eventually see Kid coming back and even getting revenge on Shanks, and maybe even teaming up with Blackbeard, as both of these guys have a common enemy, and they usually say, the friend of my enemy, wait, no, it's the enemy of my enemy is my friend. We could always see Kid on Elbaf still, and maybe even become a villain for the Straw Hats and finally get that Luffy versus Kid fight, even though he'd get absolutely washed. But even that I highly doubt, as I don't even see the Giants welcoming Kid after what just happened, with Dorry and Broggy themselves destroying his ship. I really feel bad for Kid, where his crew was slaves in Wano, his best friend ate a smile fruit, they were almost executed, and this isn't even the first time this happened. So unfortunately for his crew, I don't see them getting a third chance. And because he's usually paired up with Law, who also seems to be his equivalent, who also is fighting against Blackbeard, who's most likely gonna lose against him, Unlike Law, unfortunately, he actually has more plot to the story, so he's most likely not gonna die, whereas Kid doesn't really have anything going for him character-wise other than becoming Pirate King, which he will never end up getting because he's not the main character. So unfortunately for him, he could end up dying and not returning to the series, and honestly, it wouldn't really change much. That might bother some people, but in the grand scheme of things, Kid is not real. Him and his crew were soundly defeated in one hit, their ship was destroyed, and they even surrendered. That was the nail in the coffin and showed to me that this crew is done. But we are in the final saga and race for the One Piece, so unfortunately people gotta go. That's just how the cookie crumbles. Not everyone could be Pirate King. Maybe he was just built up to hype up Shanks and give him the poneglyph rubbings, and that sucks, but that's just how it goes in anime. Maybe Oda got tired of drawing Kid's mechanical bullshit. Maybe he wants to give his fruit to someone else, but hopefully he can return to the story because his ending did feel a bit abrupt. But if he weren't to come back, I wouldn't lose any sleep. I'm okay with it. Honestly, Kid and his boyfriend should have just stayed in the back, put on makeup and mascara and called it a day because his crew are full of bums.